Hi everyone, this is Irene Kikin Kito PE84. Hi everyone, so for today's video, I am going to report about the types of communication usually used in the classroom and work settings. At the end of this video, you'll identify the types of communication usually used in the classroom and work settings, and also differentiate the types of communication used in both classroom and workplace. So first, let us define what is communication. Communication is simply the act of transferring information from one place, person, or group to another. Every communication involves at least one sender, a message, and a recipient. So now, I will be discussing the types of communication usually used in classroom settings. So first, verbal communication. Verbal communication refers to sending or receiving a message through sounds and languages. Teachers can address one student or to the whole classroom through verbal communication. So, for example, a teacher may ask a student to stand up. So, that is a verbal communication. So, next is nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication refers to communicating without words through body language, gestures, facial expressions, the tone and pitch of the voice, and posture. For example, if a teacher is nodding their head while a student is speaking, this can be encouraging or show that they agree with the student. And the last one is written communication. Written communication is sending or receiving information through writing. It is also a writing directed at a specific audience. For example, a teacher may arrange a written assignment for students to test their knowledge or present lectures, slides, or notes for complicated information. Teachers and students interact with one another in many different contexts and use all three of these types of communication. First, teacher-class communication. Teacher-class communication exists when a teacher communicates with his entire class. Verbal communication exists when a teacher tells students information they need to know. For example, if a teacher asks a student to stop talking, this is a direct form of verbal communication. So there are ways for teachers to communicate non-verbally with their classes, such as through their posture, gesticulations, and proximity to the students. Instead of telling a student to stop talking, a teacher could use nonverbal communication by moving toward the disrupted student's desk. Not only does the disrupted student receive the message, but other students in the class who observe the intervention receive as well. Written instructions for assignment are given from the teacher for the whole class. Number 2, teacher-student communication. Teacher-student communication occurs when a teacher interacts directly with a particular student. Since a teacher interacts with her students mostly in front of the whole class, it can be difficult to distinguish teacher-student communication from teacher-class communication. Teacher-student communication requires that the teacher act one-on-one with student, such as in a conference during a class activity, before or after class or after school. This type of communication is effective for teachers who want to communicate a private message, such as a talk about constant inappropriate behavior or about taking more of a leadership role in a class. Number 3, student-teacher communication. Student-teacher communication is also direct communication between a student and a teacher, but this time, it is the student who initiates the conversation. Also, this can occur during whole class participation. For example, a student who asks a teacher a question during discussion engages student-teacher communication because it is a single student communicating with a single teacher. The reason of the reverse situation constitutes teacher-class communication and not teacher-student is the teacher's actions and messages are directed toward the whole class, while the students' questions here are only directed at the teacher. When students write emails to their teacher on graded assignments, this constitutes a written form of student-teacher communication. So, number 4, student-student communication. Student-student communication occurs when two or more students interact with one another. Successful whole class discussion stimulates student-student communication because students should talk to each other and not just to the teacher. Two students may disagree and talk back and forth to each other during such discussions. Student-student communication also occurs when students work in groups or pairs to complete assignments. And the fifth one is student-class communication. Student-class communication exists when a student or group of students direct their messages to the entire class. Whole class discussion can also stimulate this type of communication. For example, if a student asks the class a question during a discussion, the student's message is directed at the entire class. Individual or group presentations also constitute student class communication, and it is the type of communication about which students feel most nervous or self-conscious. Nonverbal communication often includes fidgeting or looking away. People interact through communication. Teaching and classroom management take place by means of communication. Communication is a means by which the varying needs, feelings, and attitudes of teachers and learners are conveyed to each other in order to establish cooperation and achieve the learning outcomes. If communication is not effective, the objectives of education cannot be attained. Therefore, the classroom manager or the teacher must know exactly what good communication is and what the principles and conditions for effective communication are, and which factors might impede this. Successful communication happens when the message is understood correctly by the receiver and the feedback given to the sender is acceptable. By Kruger and Van Schokwick, 1997. And now, let's talk about the different types of communication in the workplace. So first is verbal oral communication. Verbal communication is the use of words to share information. Verbal communication can refer to written and spoken words. Oral communication, on the other hand, refers to specifically to words being spoken. If you've been working for any period, then you'll probably agree that speaking to people is usually the best way to go. At least in the first instance of this option is available. Besides being the quickest and fastest way to get your message across, there are many other benefits. It's much, it's much easier to build rapport when speaking to someone compared to emails or other forms of communication. Verbal communication done right means you can avoid misunderstandings. Things won't be taken in a wrong way, and if they are, at least you can clear up any issues there and then. Number 2, nonverbal communication. It's not what you say, but how you say it. This old saying has stuck around forever for a reason. In communication, people will pick up on more than just the words you use. This everything else is your nonverbal communication, and it includes body language, tone of voice, facial expressions, eye contact, and intonation. You can say the words in the wrong way, and the response you get will be completely different. And speaking to someone while not making any eye contact will make them feel like you're not listening. It's impossible not to use nonverbal cues when communicating, whether you mean to or not. you will be giving them. The key is to make sure that the cues you give off are the right ones that align with your messages. Just like you wouldn't shake your head and say yes. All your nonverbal communication needs to be congruent with your verbal communication to make your message clear. Used well, good nonverbal communication leads to better communication overall, less confusion, and better rapport. Number 3, formal communication. Formal communication is another one of the different types of communication in the workplace, and it means exactly what it says. When you communicate formally, you communicate officially. The purpose of formal communication is to get the information across in a professional business manner. This doesn't mean that you can't be professional when communicating more informally, but it does mean no slang or being too familiar or casual in your communication. With time, you will hopefully build good relationships with your colleagues, your manager, and anyone you do business with regularly. However, there is still a place for formal communication, and depending on which industry you work in, how often this is will vary. The fourth one is lateral horizontal communication. Lateral communication, also called horizontal communication, is the communication between individuals, teams, groups, or departments in an organization at the same hierarchical level. The benefits of lateral communication include more open discussion, better collaboration, and idea sharing, which can lead to better innovation and less miscommunication, confusion, and duplication of work between teams where responsibilities may overlay, or where both teams are working on the same project. In this type of communication, teams also have more opportunities to be involved in decision-making processes, and any disagreement or conflict can also be discussed and resolved quickly. There are countless situations where lateral communication is beneficial. Although you'll be using it often, some of the times when it comes in handy include when you're working on a project with your own or other teams to share cross-functional knowledge, or when you want to resolve conflict or agree on ways of working between teams. The fifth is vertical communication. Vertical communication is the opposite of horizontal communication and is the communication between people, teams, or departments of an organization at different hierarchical levels. For example, between you and your boss. While the thought of this type of communication might give you an image of horrible bosses barking orders, vertical communication has to open for a company to run or even exist. Even in the flattest company structure where everyone reports to the CEO, at some point there will be information communicated to the rest of the team from the CEO, and this would still be vertical communication. When you need to escalate an issue that can't be resolved among your peers, it helps to have a clear escalation chain and to know that you can speak to someone who will be able to take action. Number 6, informal communication. Informal communication is a casual conversation between co-workers. It sits outside any business hierarchy and is more personal. It's the type of communication you have with your family and friends. So as you build strong relationships with your colleagues, the stronger these relationships become, the more informal communication you'll have. Informal communication promotes rapport building at its best. It means that people get along, making the office somewhere you want to be, a place where you can get things done while still having a laugh with the people you work with. Relationships in the workplace do evolve, so over time, depending on who you're dealing with, you might be more comfortable and able to communicate informally. However, the best advice is to remember where informal communication is concerned is that however comfortable things get. Number 7, written communication. Finally, there's written communication, which goes beyond email. Written communication is anything that involves putting pen to paper or typing. This includes email, messenger, Slack, text, PowerPoint presentations, or even simply taking notes which might be used or referenced later. Anything where you have the words written down. There are tons of reasons to write things down. If you don't already consider some of these great benefits, it's a great way to organize information since you can lay things out in a variety of visual ways. For example, by using bullet points and tables. You can be clear and concise in a way that makes it easier to communicate more complex information. From the many benefits of written communication, you've probably figured out that it's a good one to use, even if it's just in a brief. Some examples of when you might want to get things written down includes to follow up on a voicemail, as follow up to a discussion that happened between two or more parties, and if you need to explain a process in a clear and step-by-step manner, to provide a status update on a project, the dreaded resignation from a job, and thank someone publicly or formally. So number 8, visual communication. If you had to do a presentation, then it's highly likely that you used visual communication. Visual communication utilizes more than just words, but also images, graphs, and other visual displays to get the message across. Since people absorb information in different ways, make sure you use visual whenever you're presenting to a group of people. This way, you will grab everyone's attention. Another important use of visual communication is when you're trying to explain complex topic or you have a lot of data to share. Using visuals, tables, graphs, and images, you'll be able to communicate the complexity in a succinct and clear format. And the last one is listening. Last but definitely not least on this list of different types of communication in the workplace is listening, which might surprise you. While listening does indeed fall under nonverbal communication. This is such a critical part of communication that it deserves to be highlighted specifically. Ignoring listening or not giving it the credit that it's due where workplace communication is concerned is the best way to have constant stress. Lack of listening leads to mistakes, time being wasted, duplication of work, and even relationship breakdown. Yet, it still isn't always considered one of the key types of communication in the workplace. It's incredible what you take away when you truly listen. And remember, where listening is concerned, sometimes it's about what is being said as much as what is. It's about taking in everything and not just the words that are being said. There are plenty of ways that you can be communicating with the people you work with, from coworkers to stakeholders to suppliers and more. Each group of people provides a different set of challenges. So next time you need to get your message across, make sure you pick the best mode of communication for the occasion. And while you're at it, since communication is such a critical skill in any job role, it's worth improving your communication skills. The rewards will surprise you. And that's all for my report. Thank you for watching. Bye.